Hey everybody, movie reviewer next door here, and I'm back with another review and continuing the Saw reviews with Jigsaw. This is a horror thriller film from 2017 directed by Michael and Peter Spierig, or known as the Spierig brothers. And it stars Matt Passmore, Tobin Bell, Hannah Anderson, Callum Keith Rennie, Clay Bennett, and Laura Vandervoort. In this film, dead bodies begin to turn up all over the city, each meeting their demise in a variety of grisly ways. All investigations begin to point the finger at deceased killer John Kramer. So, what did I think of Jigsaw? Well, it's the worst so far. Are you surprised? I know according to Letterboxd, the worst is Spiral. Um, I haven't revisited it yet, so I don't know. So far, 8 films in, this is the worst for me. This is somehow worse than Saw 3. Let me get to the cast so I can rant about this fucking movie. Also, spoilers. I already said it in the title, but massive spoilers because I have to talk about how this film not only fails as just a normal film, but fails completely as a Saw film. Matt Passmore was decent as Logan Nelson. He's a cop. There's not a lot interesting to him, but he gives a decent performance. I remember seeing him in another film that I like definitely more than this called Army of One. It was an indie action revenge thriller that was actually really good. Starring Ellen Hallman. I do really like that film. Uh but yeah, um Tobin Bell as John Kramer, Jigsaw, he's barely in the film again. He's still good. Callum Keith Rennie plays Detective Halloran, one of the detectives working with Logan Nelson that could possibly be Jigsaw's apprentice from the grave. Hannah Anderson plays Eleanor Bonneville. She's obsessed with Jigsaw. Even owns a lot of the original traps through some ungodly, stupid plot point that I'll mention. Clay Bennett, he's there as Keith Hunt. He's fine. And Laura Vandervoort is Anna, one of the main people in the game. She's also fine. This film is a fucking disgrace against the Saw series, just as a normal film. It's a fucking disgrace. Now, I have to give context. If you were to watch this film not knowing anything about the Saw series, having never seen Saw 1 through 7, any of the films in that lineup I just gave you, you would probably think, oh, that movie was okay. You might even think it's decent. But especially having seen the first 7 Saw films, you if you were somebody who has seen the first 7 Saw films and like most of those films, like I do, you would also realize that this film shits on pretty much everything about Saw. Because this film doesn't need to exist. It ties in almost none to the first 7 films at all, barely into the series at all. Most of this is your random run of the mill serial killer film. And just compared to the rest of the Saw films, which I'm rating these on how they compare to the first film or to the concept of people being stuck in these traps and there being an ongoing investigation. That's what I'm doing. As a normal film, I don't know what I'd rate this because I still wouldn't love it or like it even. As a Saw film though, this is a disgrace. This is awful. This is actual cancer. Um one of the big things against this film, So with all of the Saw films, you have twists, right? I'm gonna have to spoil the twist right now. I know it's a spoiler review and I should like work up to the twist, but I have to spoil it in order to talk about how stupid it is and how obvious it was. The twist by the end is that this guy that you're following from the beginning turns out to be Jigsaw's accomplice. Oh, where have you heard that before? Hoffman. Because Hoffman was basically one of the main characters in one of the movies, and then he becomes one of the accomplices. Who would have fucking thought? Who would have thought that fucking Logan would be the apprentice? And it doesn't stop there. The stupidity does not stop there, folks. Earl Near the end of the film, when both of the characters are drugged, you only see the guy, the Detective Halloran, who the entire movie you're supposed to be led to believe that he is the Jigsaw killer or he's actually the accomplice or something. Same with Eleanor. Eleanor's a big fucking red herring. She's just a weirdo. And Halloran, he's a terrible guy, but he's not the Jigsaw killer. And if you don't figure out what the twist is after seeing the scene where, oh, Detective Halloran gets drugged, but you don't see Logan get drugged, and then they both appear in the same place, and he's like, yeah, I got drugged too. That should immediately tip you off that you're that they are specifically not showing you certain things just so they can have a twist. Earlier in the film, there's the 5 people with the buckets on their heads. All 4 of them escape the room except one, and the camera strategically moves out of frame so that you don't see what happens to the guy. Yeah, he gets cut up, and it turns out that guy is Detective Nelson, or Detective Logan Nelson as well. Not only that, Jigsaw's like, oh, I feel bad for this guy. He didn't deserve to almost die for a legitimate mistake, which was that he accidentally switched out uh John Kramer's X-ray results with somebody else's, so they didn't get to his cancer fast enough before it became like worse. Which I don't know how many times this fucking series is gonna try to like retcon shit, but like or like add shit to the other films because this film does not have any of the well I'm still talking about the twist. Like the twist was all to set up Detective Halloran for all the things that Detective Nelson has been doing, which is a direct rip from the plot of Saw 5, where Hoffman got basically did the same thing to Strom, set him up at the crime scene and everything. And they never went back to that plot point, which is annoying. But they're basically rehashing plot points from the other movies, and I feel that it's because the directors, the Spirit Brothers, have never seen the Saw films, because that's legitimately what it comes off as. Other issues with this film. You have the same editor that the entire series has had, Kevin Gruder, who directed 2 of the better films in the series for me. Saw 6 and Saw the Final Chapter, which I liked Saw 6, and I thought Saw the Final Chapter had its issues, but it was still pretty half decent. Kevin Gruder seemed to understand what the fans wanted while still delivering an actual film going experience. Even though there's the writing shit that's wrong with Saw 7, it's still enjoyable because of how it tries to wrap up the plot that has been ongoing and certain loose ends that need tying up from the previous films. Here, Kevin Gruder is back as the editor. There is none of his trademark editing here. This feels like they put his name on it. He left like 5 minutes after realizing how shit the movie he was working on was, and then they got someone else and then just slapped the Kevin Gruder's name there so that people wouldn't think any different. Because this does not feel like Kevin Gruder's editing at all. I mean that. I'm not just saying that to give this film a lower review to be that guy. If I can go with the crowd, I will. The crowd says that the first three are the best ones in the series, up until Saw X, of course, because Saw X is getting really high reviews now. But the crowd says the first three are the best. I personally like Saw 5 and 6 better than 2. If I wanted to go with the crowd, I would. But I'm not going to do that because that would be dishonest, and I pride myself on my honesty. But here, there's so much shit that just the main game of the film does not feel like Jigsaw. It doesn't feel like a Jigsaw thing at all. And even worse, the bodies that keep popping up that are supposed to be like to trick you into thinking, "Oh, the game is going on at the same time as the film." Um basically, Detective Nelson has been recreating the exact same game that happened 10 years ago, which was a game that happened before all of the other Jigsaw games. Yippee. Really. That's what you did. So you basically pulled a we don't know how to write a twist, so we made up some bullshit. So what they did here is basically just, oh, we have to here's the issue with that, the recreation of the game thing. Because if one person does something different to how the original game went, your plan would not work because you're trying to trick people into thinking this game is the same one that went on 10 years ago and tricking people into thinking Jigsaw did this. First off, Jigsaw is fucking dead. Everybody knew it. Everybody's seen his fucking body. They know he's dead. They've also known that Jigsaw's had accomplices. Amanda Young for one, Detective Hoffman, Jill Tuck, Carrie Elways as Dr. Gordon. He has had four, count 'em, four apprentices. They are all dead by now, except Carrie Elwes' character, but my guess is Carrie Elwes saw the final chapter just as a fuck you to them because he got paid more money and something about the first movie and him not getting the amount of money he was promised. I don't know anything about that really. I can't comment on it. But why would they immediately go to Jigsaw's still alive? Why is that where they go to? Not, oh, maybe it was Dr. Gordon because everybody fucking knew he was one of the survivors of the Jigsaw games, the ones from the first movie, and in this universe that still happened. They make no mention of Gordon. They make a mention of Jill Tuck, but you don't see her. You don't see any flashbacks, probably because they couldn't get the rights to use the footage, which is even weirder because it's this film was still put out by Lionsgate. I don't and Twisted Pictures. And I'm very confused why there weren't ever any flashbacks to the events of the previous films. Could they not get all the actors together? Is because that was never a problem before. For most of the other films, they got these actors that were big parts in the other films to be there for a little bit. I don't see why that's an issue now. Um, but why would they not? Why do they immediately go to? I want people to comment because if anyone sees this and understands what the film is trying to do, I'd love to hear it because it would make me happier to understand it. My guess is that it's not meant to be understood. It's meant to just be like, oh, how many more times can we say Jigsaw? Because they say Jigsaw like 50 fucking times in this movie. They say his name more times in this film, I bet, than like the last three films combined. But why do they not immediately think it was Dr. Gordon? Because last we know, Dr. Gordon was the last known apprentice. Also, there aren't any Jigsaw games that should be happening anymore. At the end of Saw the final chapter, that Hoffman was finishing up the last of Jigsaw's games. That's why it's the final chapter, because the story was meant to conclude there. And for the most part, it did conclude there. Pretty satisfyingly for the most part. So the fact that this film is literally just here to be, oh, Jigsaw did these games all this time ago of people who have affected other people's lives, that type of thing. But for the most part, it just feels very slapped together. Again, this feels like those Dimension films, Hellraiser films, Hellraiser Inferno, Hellraiser Hellseeker, Hellraiser Deader, Hellraiser, um, what was the other one? Mm, Hellworld. Uh, Hellraiser Revelations was technically written originally as a Hellraiser film, but then Hellraiser Judgment came out and also wasn't originally a Hellraiser movie. Pinhead was shoved into that too. So this feels to me like that. It feels like a random cop drama or like a murder mystery film with Saw elements shoved in, though there are no real traps in this. Let me go through what the traps are, by the way. These are possibly the most boring traps so far. Maybe even more boring than Spiral, and I didn't know that was possible. Because in Spiral, there's at least something resembling traps. There's them being chained to something that's pulling them towards blades that they have to give a bit of blood in order to pass, which is barely a trap. There's the part where Carly has to inject one of the needles that will save her from her poison and release everybody. Also barely a trap. There's the spiral thing that the black dude, I can't remember his fucking name, is being lowered into, and he has to like pull the brake lever in order to stop it and survive. Barely a trap. I mean, technically it's a trap, but it's just so like so boring and bullshitty and oh yeah, the one guy what before the spiral trap, the bike brake trap, the one bitch and the one bitch that's left and the black dude are in this silo that's filling with feed, I guess, and then there's like knives and blades and shit falling on them. It's like someone didn't even fucking try to write these traps. Like they're so unoriginal and boring. And oh my god, the CGI. There's so much fucking CGI that looks like garbage. The CG, like most of the traps are practical and there is practical blood. There are practical blood effects. There are most of the time. In the other Saw films, they usually did that in order to try to enhance the effects, and sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. Here it is very noticeable. Um, the final trap is also barely a trap because there's no way of getting out of it. Really, there isn't really any way to get out of it. It's another unwinnable trap. I guess for a reason, but the as the stuff is like falling on them, like the blades and shit, there's like a knife that falls into the guy's shoulder. There's these little pins that fall onto the woman's arm, uh, and it just feels like the CGI looks so bad. Like at times they're practical, but for the most part, I'm guessing because they didn't want to hurt the actors, they of course, but they had like CGI implements, and then like they could like cut to a camera angle where they could drop the actual prop, but it still looks really bad. There had to be another way for you to shoot this to make it still look good and not have to use all this bullshit CGI. And as they're in that, they can do nothing. So where's their chance? And this other guy that's got his leg tied up in wire has to pull this lever um to basically cut off his own leg in order to save these other guys. Um and then the last trap, after the woman tries to escape, she gets knocked out, and then her and the kind of kind of heavy set dude. There's a shotgun in the middle of the room, and Jigsaw's over there to try to trick you into thinking Jigsaw's still alive, even though we good and well fucking know he's been fucking dead. As if, okay, if somebody had never seen the Saw films, they might think, oh, Jigsaw is alive. And they might think it's like just tying into the first movie, maybe. Because at the end of the first movie, Jigsaw was alive. But with this, they're trying to trick you by editing it in a certain way to make you think that they're happening at the same time. Now, the way that Saw 2 did this worked because you see them on monitors, you're never seeing them in person. Well, you're never seeing them in person in the same shot as like the shit going on currently. And at that point, it was kind of a fresh twist because Jigsaw made multiple references to just bide your time, just wait for it. Wait 2 hours and it'll all be over and you'll have your son back. And then the son turned out to be in the safe. Here, they are editing it strategically because they don't want to admit that they're lifting a twist from Saw 2. They're lifting many twists from other films. The twist of Nelson being turning out to be the villain or whatever, or the newest Jigsaw accomplice or apprentice is lifted from Saw 4, where at the end you find out Hoffman was in on it. There's again what I just said there, but like, oh god, oh yeah, the last trap. I completely forgot. I got sidetracked. I'm sorry. There's too much bullshit in this movie. Jigsaw like puts a shotgun there and he said, "This is the key to your freedom." Holds up the fucking shotgun round to the camera. Did you get that, folks? This is the key. The key is in here. This is the key. He doesn't say the key's in here, but he says this is the key to your freedom. Puts it in the shotgun. Doesn't solder it closed, which I immediately thought, again, I've seen this film before, but immediately thinking, like, rewatching it, I was like, okay, just open it. But no, this bitch immediately goes, and I know I keep calling her a bitch. I'm just sick and tired of this movie. I don't care. The actress is probably a very nice woman. But she immediately tries to shoot him, and then the guy's trying to talk to her. She doesn't want to listen. Then she gets her face blown off because the shotgun was backwards or something. And both of the keys to each of their collars or whatever, or chains, were in the shell, the shotgun shell. Um, and they're both broken now, so this guy's gonna rot in hell here, I guess. Also, all of the people in this current game are irredeemable as fuck. You think at the beginning that this female character that ends up dying in that way is the person you should be rooting for because she's in here for something she didn't do, her husband did. But if you know how Jigsaw works, if again, like I said, if you have never seen the Saw series and you know nothing about how Jigsaw works, you might think that she's innocent. And she's the only one in this group that's innocent. She's not. But Carly, the bitch that gets the acid in her throat, stole a woman's purse with her inhaler in it and left her to die. The black kid sold Jigsaw's nephew a motorbike that had a faulty brake and he listed as being in perfect condition for $600. And then the nephew ends up getting offed by a bus. The kind of heavy set dude uh, apparently let his friends die in a car crash and didn't own up to anything about it. The woman that you think you're supposed to be following until this big plot twist is revealed that's not obvious at all if you know what the Saw series is or know how Jigsaw works. She smothered her own child because the child was crying with a pillow, blamed it on her husband. The husband gets dragged off to a fucking a mental ward. and then he hangs himself with his sheets. And this bitch, throughout the entire, I mean, the character, this bitch, throughout the entire fucking movie, is trying to lecture people, or not lecture people, but she's like, oh, we know you're dirty. I didn't do anything. All this and that. Do the filmmakers think that they're smart? Do the writers think that they're smart? And you can tell this is not written by anybody who wrote the previous films. This is not written by Lee Wannell. This is not written by Marcus Dunstan, who, by the way, if you want an actually good set of horror films, The Collector and The Collection. Complete story within 2 films. The Collector is 89 minutes long with credits. Collection is 82 minutes long with credits. Watch those together. Less than 3 hours. You get a complete story. You got all the gore you could want. And it's not just torture porn, it's actually creepy as fuck. And an exciting time. And a main character that you grow to love, played by um, Josh Stewart. And hopefully they're still doing the 3rd film. That could be cool. But watch those instead. Marcus Dunstan knows how to make films. This fucking guy, these 2 guys, these Spirit brothers, don't. They don't understand what makes a good twist. And just overall, I don't know if I mentioned, but the guy who's been doing the scores to all of the Saw films up until this film, and I think throughout all of them has been doing them. I think he's in the new one. Charlie Clouser, he does the score for this, and it does not feel like a Saw score at all. All the last films feel like similar scores, similar enough to the point, not to the point where they blend together or anything, but they have their own sound. They have their own identity. This film very rarely uses Saw cues, and when it does the stupid remix shit, and this film is infuriating. It really is. I will never watch this fucking movie again. There's a documentary on the Blu-ray disc though, that I wouldn't mind checking out, but other than that, the documentary is about the entire series. I'm very curious what it says. But other than that, I'm never watching this film again. If I'm doing a Saw watch through marathon, I'll like nothing said in this adds anything to the last films. At least the last films, each film would add something to the story. This doesn't. For the most part, they added something to the last film's story. So, yeah, this is a fucking piece of shit. I've been talking about this piece of shit for like 28 minutes. And yeah, fuck Jigsaw. Can't wait to finish off the ones that are released with Spiral. And Saw X, I'll try to find some way to watch it. But that was my review of Jigsaw. If you've seen the film, let me know what you think in the description. And movie reviewer next door out.